Hello, welcome to VR Roundtable, episode 107. My name is Gary, and joining me is Steve and Anthony. Welcome to 2019. We're in the future. Finally, we're here. Flying cars are about to make an appearance, I assume. But so we've had a couple of weeks off, and we're going to get into what we've been playing over those couple of weeks a little bit later on in the show. But we hope everyone's doing well. They've had a good holiday break, and they're ready for 2019. Thanks to everyone joining us in chat, and we'll feel free to leave some comments. But let me go over to Anthony first. How are you? What have you been up to these past couple of weeks off?
Sorry. I've been doing good. Everything's basically the same old, same old. I just, everyday bra, or whatever it is. What is that? There's some YouTuber that has a song, Everyday Bra, or something like that. That's pretty much what it is for me.
Good stuff. Steve, what have you been up to, man, over the past couple of weeks?
Nothing much, just Christmas and the holidays and all the goodness that comes with that. We didn't go anywhere. We stayed here. I don't think I came out of PJs for like 4 days or something. Like, it was like I grew a beard, and when it came time to go back to work, I was like, hey, I'm just going to keep it. So it was a great, lazy holiday break. I spent a little time in VR. Maybe we'll talk about what I played, later. Nothing new. Didn't really review any games or do any work per se over the break. So, I just kind of played whatever I felt like playing. So that was good. But now it's a new year, and I went back to work and, settling into the routine again.
Yeah, we're all ready to get back into the routine. And Fleet Rogers just made a comment in chat saying there's no time off for Anthony, and that's true, isn't it? You've still got doing your VR 365 daily show, so you're still on the ball with all the latest happenings in VR anyway.
Yeah, you name a show called VR 365. It's a lot of work you're putting out there for yourself.
That's true. So during the break, I had a couple of weeks off, really, more or less. I went down to Devon in the south of England with my family, and so I didn't play too much VR, honestly. It was more like Oculus Go kind of stuff, but we'll get onto that a little bit later on what I played. But let's get straight back into it. So the main news we've got this week, the first little news story we've got is to say that VR doubled on Steam in 2018. I don't know too much about this. I didn't read too much into it, but let me pass it over to Anthony. What can you tell us on this?
Yeah, so this isn't a big, huge deal here, but basically what it is, when we started the year off, if you did the Steam survey on the hardware, VR headsets, people that had VR headsets connected to their PC when they actually did this accounted for 0.4% of the Steam population, which is less than a half of a percent, right? Okay, well, in the year 2018, we doubled up, baby. We are at 0.8, which is still less than a percent. And Ars Technica did a story on this. And one of the things that they were talking about is that this number, this 0.8%, is almost the same exact thing as people using Linux on Steam. So we're kind of a niche of a niche. That's what I like. Or niche. I don't know what the proper pronunciation is. I guess it's potato. It doesn't matter. But yeah, we're pretty tiny in the grand scheme of things. They also did a breakdown on the VR headset distribution. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I know that Oculus was 46%. I believe Vive 46 point something. I believe Vive was like 40 point something, or maybe 41 point something. And then Windows mixed reality was just below 9%, and then a little percent left over for like Oculus DK2 or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's good though. But I guess you could say, because it's still an improvement, it's exponential, isn't it? So it's doubled now. It's only been out, consumer VR, it's only been out for a couple of years, just over, we're coming up to the third year of consumer VR in April. So I think the fact that it's doubled in the last 12 months speaks at least some positivity towards that. Steve, what do you think?
Well, two sides of the coin. You can say, oh, less than a percent, whatever. But you can also say, yeah, it's doubled. Like anytime something doubles, that's growth. That's the opposite of what we might talk about later in terms of a crash. So, VR is growing, and, I wouldn't have said, sight unseen if someone said, hey, Steve, how much did VR grow last year in 2018 on Steam in terms of hardware? I wouldn't have said it doubled. So that is surprising to me in a positive way.
Oh, I just wanted to mention too that like if you do the math, it should translate to about 720,000 people that are in VR on Steam in terms of active monthly users. Like I believe 90 million active monthly users or something like that.
Yeah, good stuff. And just on that point of like VR growing, Paradise Decay said that Jacksepticeye has just released a Beat Saber video, which is great because he's got, I mean, how many ridiculous numbers, millions of subscribers. So that's great for VR that he enjoys that as well. It's supposed to be a really good video. You know, head over there after and check that out because that guy definitely needs the views. Let's get on to the next little news story we've got here. This is so people were talking about this in the chat actually before we even started the show, but Linus Tech Tips, they had a video which was originally titled, I believe, VR is crashing, and then when I watched it, it said VR is struggling, which I think seems like a more reasoned title, honestly, for that video. And there was a little bit of backlash with this because they went through a few different points, which were not all, honestly, not necessarily well researched for the most part. And they were pointing to the fact of why VR is struggling at this present moment in time. And, you know, this was going around the subreddit saying that this is the latest VR is dead video from Linus Tech Tips. I don't know if it went that far, honestly, but it certainly wasn't a great video if you're a VR enthusiast, just to hear his points, which were not particularly well researched, I don't think, in some cases. Although I will say that I think in some parts there were some valid arguments that they had as well. I'll get onto a couple of points that I want to get to after I've passed it over to Anthony. What did you think of this video?
Well, you know, it's funny because yesterday I woke up and I went to the Vive subreddit, and it was the #1 upvoted thing. And it was like this, and it seemed like it was a really big deal. Like, you know, Linus's new video, I don't really agree with it. You know, I forget what the title was, right? And so I click on that, and it had all these different points about all the different things that were said, and kind of, I believe Facepalm was the guy that posted this, and he was kind of reacting to all of these different points. And so I assumed that this was like a really big kind of a kerfuffle kind of a thing. Like it was really super negative and everything. And so I hadn't seen the video, right? And so I was getting ready for my show. And so I made a thumbnail for my show saying, is VR dead? And I'm kind of looking like I'm all pissed off and everything, because I thought this was like a big thing. And then so I still had like a half an hour before my show is going to start. And I watched the video. I watched this video that everyone's talking about like 3 different times. And I'm like, I wouldn't even have blinked an eye at this. Like, I didn't notice. I mean, sure, he made some points of some negativity here and there, but everything, like, nothing was like making me super pissed off about anything. I thought it was kind of crazy, but oh well.
Steve, what did you think of this? Because there was quite a big backlash, and I think there were quite a lot of comments on this YouTube video as well that they put out there from VR enthusiasts that had a big problem with what he was saying. But what did you think of this?
Well, you know, me personally, I don't put a lot into it because I don't listen to Linus. Like I'm a rational thinking human being, and I can form my own opinions. So I personally don't put much into it, but I did think he's a little bit of a hypocrite because, you know, 2-3 months ago, he made an Oculus funded sponsored video talking about how great VR was and how, you know, with asynchronous space warp, you can get into VR with a low end PC and all that. So a little bit of a hypocrite. You know, if you take the tone of the 2 videos, and then, you know, he does have a platform, though, unfortunately, a very large platform. So it does kind of, I don't know, grate at me a little bit when he uses that platform, A, to be a hypocrite, and B, to say things, but in a very uplifting manner. And to me, the biggest takeaway from the drama, so to speak, of the whole situation is that if you go to that video and you look at the comments, it's comment after comment after comment of people saying, no, brah, you're wrong. Like, or no, you're wrong. Like, VR is alive. VR has lots of games. And, I think that is a distinct difference than maybe 2 years ago when, you know, you take sort of the NeoGAF tone on VR or something like that, where anytime it was brought up, the circle jerk echo chamber was bagging on VR and saying negative things about it. And this is the first time where I've seen the public in a comment section or in a public thread come together and actually be pro VR and promote VR and be positive about it and go counter to the original post. So I like seeing that. So as the biggest takeaway is the community stepped up. Now, I don't know if it's because we posted on Reddit and we all kind of came out like an army and attacked the video, or if it's truly, sort of his audience as a whole that feels that way. And he got the message because they did in one of their follow-up podcast type videos, not all dissimilar to what we're doing here on VR Roundtable. He and the guy he does the video with, they kind of walked it back a little bit. They didn't say that they were wrong in the original video, but they did kind of walk their stance back and defended and try to rationalize their comments. So that tells me that his audience got to him.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I did like the follow-up video, actually. I think it made them look a lot more reasoned. I watched the video, and I'm sort of with Anthony. I didn't hear at any point where they were saying VR is dead in that video. They had some criticism of it, and I think in some cases there was a small amount of validity to what they were saying in certain cases. But at the same time, I think it's difficult. And what, Steve, you were saying about the platform, they have a huge platform. This is not great. As a VR enthusiast, we're sort of a niche, as Anthony said. We're a niche. And when you go into a YouTuber of this many millions of subscribers, it doesn't feel great when you hear them criticizing something that you love and want to continue. And that's the argument. At the same time, I will say that there was no VR is dead in this video. In fact, I think towards the end of the video, they had a few more reasoned arguments with it. I just feel at the end of the day that it doesn't make the VR community look great if we get overly defensive about videos like this and attack them too much, because it makes us look like we've got something to be defensive about, and I don't think we do. I think VR is fine. It's not perfect where it is now, but we're all looking towards the future and where we'll eventually get to, and that's the exciting thing for me. Going back, that's me trying to be a little bit balanced about this video. Going back, I didn't like the video. I don't really like Linus Tech Tips, so I don't really enjoy sort of defending them, honestly. But I think we just need to be a little bit balanced and not be overly defensive and too reactionary against videos like this, which will crop up from time to time. I think it's always worth defending VR, but not to the point where we're going to go on like an attack of people that are trying to have small criticisms with it as well.
Yeah. We've had Justin Arnold and Dicky Boy 23 suggest for us to invite Linus and Luke onto VR Roundtable to do the state of VR. And I haven't spoken to Anthony or Gary about that, but I'll just do it live here. I'm going to go on a limb and say we have an open invitation. If Linus wants to come on VR Roundtable to talk the state of VR anytime. So there, send it to him. Say we're willing to chat it up with him.
Yeah, we'll go for that. Yeah. I'm sure they'll take us up on that offer, actually. It's difficult, though, because we've got quite a busy schedule, so I don't know if we'll be able to get them on board when it's convenient for us, unfortunately. But anyway, let's get on to the main topic of the show. So we're not really doing too much in news this week. We want to keep it pretty casual this week and talk about, since it's the beginning of 2019, we want to get onto some predictions, some expectations, and also some sort of personal wish lists of what we want from VR in 2019. So the first thing we've got down here, it's going to be pretty casual, but let's go on to the list. We've got sort of a few points we want to hit on. The first thing is hardware predictions for 2019. Now, we'll get onto Oculus Quest in a second, but the first thing I want to touch on is some of the VR headsets, the hardware of VR headsets that could potentially be coming out this year. Now, we know that we've got the manufacturers that are doing VR headsets at the moment. We've got the HTCs, the Oculus, but we've also getting these rumors of the Valve headsets, and also LG. LG have still yet to make a contribution, really, in terms of hardware, even though we've seen headsets from them. They haven't really formally released anything or anything like that. So maybe they'll make an appearance at some point during 2019. I do want to just go around everybody and speak about what do we expect from hardware manufacturers, what VR headsets we expect to see this coming year, and do you have any hopes or expectations from other manufacturers that could potentially join in? Steve, I'll go back to you first on this. What's your expectations from all of these big manufacturers?
Well, from Oculus, it's pretty straightforward. I expect the Quest. I am not expecting any sort of Rift Plus or Rift Pro. Not saying it's not possible. It very well could do it. I'm just personally not expecting it. I think they're going to focus on Quest, and that's going to be where a lot of their attention is. With HTC, well, we got a sort of a teaser snapshot. I think next week we'll start hearing maybe something of what they have up their sleeve, in terms of hardware. I'm not convinced that there's necessarily a new sort of PC tethered Vive platform headset, but could there be some sort of additional standalone or something meant more so than the Focus to go toe to toe with the Oculus Quest? That's possible. From Valve, we have that leaked HMD. If it's a product that's going to become commercialized, if it's a product that's going to see the light of day, I would think it would see the light of day in 2019, given as far along as it seemed to be. But I wouldn't necessarily bank on it because, if you talked to me any point last year, I would have said Knuckles was a 2018 product based on how far along that product seemed to be when we started hearing about it. And, we're still waiting on Knuckles. Which brings me to my next point. I do think we'll see Knuckles in 2019. Good Lord. If we don't, what are they doing? Sony, I don't really expect anything. I guess we might start hearing about the PS5 or something, but, and then you got, stuff on the more fringe stuff like the Pimax. I'd almost say the Pimax is a 2019 headset by the time, it's actually open and available for people to order it and get it in a reasonable time frame. And honestly, I am not expecting, maybe I'm glass half empty right now, but I'm not expecting LG or any of these other companies to come in and step. I want them to. I want someone to step in with a serious Steam VR headset and put some pressure on HTC. But I'm personally not expecting it. I do think the market is slow from a business and investment standpoint. And I think the companies that can make serious hardware have done their analyzing and have determined that to be the case and that they're kind of sitting on the outside waiting to jump in. So that's where I would be as far as my expectations. That's not necessarily what I want to see happen. It's just what I think is going to happen.
I'll pass it over to you, Anthony. But I did want to touch on something because it is CES next week, and we did see that tweeted picture of HTC saying that all their gear is ready to go to CES and show off. And on that picture, there was a pixelated logo of something. We don't know what it is. So maybe if you can start on that, but then lead on to what else you expect from all these manufacturers next year.
Yeah, so the picture in question, you saw a box that said Vive on the left, and then you saw a box in the middle that said Viveport, and then you saw a box on the right that said Vive something. You could clearly see that it said Vive, and it really looked like either maybe a C or a G, that first letter. And some people have talked about Vive Cloud. Some people have talked about Vive Gloves. And then, of course, there's Vive Cosmos. HTC trademarked Vive Cosmos not that long ago, actually. And the timing could be right from a standpoint of when they trademarked Vive Cosmos, it could be just exactly the kind of window they needed prior to January CES, which is, of course, next week. So we're going to find out something from HTC. Now, a number of people talked about this tweet and they said, but gear, the way HTC kind of described it, it sounds more like an accessory than a full-blown unit there. But of course, maybe they don't want to let the cat out of the bag. So maybe they kind of did that on purpose. But just from a CES standpoint in general, I'm excited for CES. One of the things I'll say is Cliff Bleszinski recently did a tweet where he said, does VR have a killer app? And this was on January 1st. He tweeted out, does VR finally have a killer app? And one of the guys that replied to him was Ryan McCaffrey, who's like the head of IGN Xbox, I believe, if he's still there. And one of the things he said in his tweet that I found interesting is he's like, wow, we're 3 years in. We're literally 3 years into this thing, and a Vive 2 and a Rift 2 are nowhere in sight. And that's kind of true. I mean, we're literally 3 years in. We haven't seen a sniff of a legitimate Vive 2.0 or a Rift 2.0, and that does seem kind of crazy. So I feel like we're due. I feel like we're overdue. I feel like there should be something that happens at this CES. Last year, I watched the LG keynote, and I was thinking, oh, there's going to be some major big thing that's going to happen during this LG keynote. Nothing, not a peep about VR. And it's very possible that maybe we were just 1 year early. So LG, maybe they'll be there. Maybe Vive will be there. I also think that we're going to have a wild card. There's going to be some other company that enters the game. And the companies that I look towards is, do you make a screen? Are you a TV manufacturer? Because if you're a TV manufacturer, you should probably be dipping your toes in these VR and AR waters, because maybe 15, 20 years from now, no one's really going to care about TVs, and you might need to start moving away from that a little bit. So maybe Sharp, what if Sharp announced a VR headset? I mean, there could be some wild card that comes out of the blue. So I'm hoping for something like that to kind of stir things up a little bit. But one thing I did want to mention real quick before we move off of this is one of the problems with a Vive, like a Vive 2.0 and Knuckles and Valve and that whole connection there, is we're not going to get a Knuckles. Like, I don't think we're going to get a Knuckles controller until one of these Valve games is done. And so I think HTC is in this situation where they're basically in handcuffs. They're in handcuffs by Valve. They can't do anything until Valve gives them the final go-ahead to have these Knuckles controllers and the base stations 2.0, but they're not going to give them the go-ahead until one of those games is done. And I kind of feel like Valve as well, I kind of feel like they want to have a small window of exclusivity where you have to buy a Knuckles controller and one of these games, or maybe a bundle of these games, through Valve directly, and that's going to be available for a number of months before you can buy it in a bundled package. So I kind of feel like we all believe that there should be this new headset. There should be a new Vive, maybe LG with Knuckles and base stations and everything. But I kind of feel like this Valve game is like a stumbling block. I don't know.
Yeah, on that point, I'm not sure about this Valve game. I don't know if we can expect that even this year, or one of these three games that they're supposedly working on, or they've confirmed they're working on. I think they're going to have to release, because there's just so little information on the fact that they are even going to release anything this year. And yet the Knuckles are almost finished. This headset that got leaked seems to be sort of late in the game and this kind of stuff. I just think that they've got to get these Knuckles controllers out there. In fact, on MRTV, Sebastian at MRTV, he was sent some Knuckles controllers by Valve as well. So, I think that speaks to the fact if they're giving these things out to YouTubers now, like Sebastian, then I think there has to be some weight behind the fact that these things are imminent. And I'm not sure we can rely on a game being released from Valve at the same time. It would be great. I would love that. But I don't know if they can deliver on that at the same time as these Knuckles controllers.
One last thing. There was this guy on stage, and this was in very late 2017. It was a Valve employee, and they were talking about these games, and he was saying, a year from now, we're going to have something very exciting to show you. Does anybody remember that? Like they were like someone was on stage saying a year from now, like basically saying we can't say nothing now, but a year from now you're going to be blown away by. And he was insinuating one of those Valve games, and that was in late 2017. So here we are. We're more than a year later. Obviously, they missed their deadline there, but eventually a shoe has to drop.
Yeah, I hope so too. Just quickly before we move on from this. because I'm in the market, I'm ready to buy a new headset. I've got an Oculus Rift, I've got a PSVR, and I'm ready to get the next level of fidelity. Honestly, I'm not. Field of view would be great, but honestly, what I really want is something which is high resolution and has foveated rendering. One of the comments we had in chat just a few minutes ago was to do with the fact that what's the point in a Rift 2 if no current cards can even run it at the resolution? Well, the answer to that is foveated rendering. So it doesn't need any more power in order to run it, but you still get the benefit of high resolutions. And I was playing Elite Dangerous. I will get onto this a little bit later, but going back into Elite Dangerous on my Oculus Rift after spending a few days away with only playing the Oculus Go, it was jarring. As great as Elite Dangerous looks in the Rift, it's just there's too many god rays. The resolution is slightly too low, and it sort of ruins the enjoyment for me in that game. So I'm ready to move up to the next generation of headset, honestly, and I think we have to get something this year from some manufacturer. And I'm in the market. I'm ready to jump on to whoever is going to step up to the plate. We've got Pimax, and that's great. And I'm really interested to see all the reports that are slowly coming out from people that have got Pimaxes. But at the same time, I want a known quantity. I want a known manufacturer that I trust and can deliver these things on time and to the quality that I think we should have in VR headsets as well. That's not a dig at Pimax. I should make that clear, because I'm still very excited about Pimax as well. Okay, well, let's get on to the Oculus Quest, because this is something that we definitely know is coming out this year, hopefully in the first half of this year as well. This is a standalone VR device. This is a 6 Degrees of Freedom standalone VR headset, which will have presumably the same optics as the Oculus Go, which is great. As I mentioned, the graphics look great in the Oculus Go. So it'll be sort of a stopgap between the Oculus Go and the Oculus Rift. So I will definitely be picking one of these things up. But my question to both of you guys really is, will this have a big impact? We spoke last year about the Oculus Go is having sort of a mainstream impact, and I think it's done pretty well. I don't know if it's had quite the impact maybe we hoped for, but the Oculus Quest is taking things to the next level. Steve, I'll go over to you first on this. The Oculus Quest, I know that you're sort of semi-excited about it. I don't know if you're as excited about it as I am, but also, what do you think the overall impact of this device will be during 2019?
Well, I think the impact is going to be big. I can appreciate the device for what it is. Like, I'm personally, I'll always operate on the show in these two different modes where I'm between the business industry analyzing side and then my own personal taste, right? So, my own personal taste is I'm not sure the Oculus Quest is going to truly change my VR gaming habits. I think it's going to be a good product. But I think it'll be a bigger deal to the people who aren't me. I'm sitting here with my 2080 Ti and, I'm always chasing the high end experience, right? I'm chasing the dream in terms of fidelity and the scope of games. Whereas that's not necessarily where people are, like where the mass market is. So I think the Quest is going to be successful, and it's possible that the Quest will shoot past the Vive and the Rift and PC VR. I don't think the Quest is going to catch PlayStation VR, at least not anytime soon. So that's where I think Quest is going to have a big impact. I'm probably going to get one. Like, why wouldn't I? I could see myself completely retiring the Oculus Go. I don't know if it'll serve a point once the Quest is out. And, I think it's going to be a good product. But I guess my personal hang up then is I'm worried about the scope of games. I think the last time we talked about it, Anthony, you kind of reduced it down to like being a graphic whore. And yeah, I care about graphics, but I'm more looking towards the scope of a game. Like, use Fallout as example. Like, what if we had a really low poly simple version of Fallout, but the scope of the game in terms of the size of the world or the number of characters, like that's kind of what I'm worried about with something like the Quest. Yeah, it's going to do Beat Saber and all that kind of stuff really well, I assume. But is there going to be any large scoped games in terms of just the depth of a game? Even if it's simple cartoony graphics, like, some kind of animated Final Fantasy-ish RPG or something, is that going to happen on the Oculus Quest? And right now we have this same divide, and I know, we're probably repeating ourselves, or I'm repeating myself in past shows, but if I look at the types of games that are on a iPad or on a Galaxy Tab, or something like that, like, these devices can actually play some pretty complicated games, but for some reason, the mobile mentality is to create simple experiences, and it's not a fidelity issue. If we look at what Bethesda doing with Elder Scrolls Blades or whatever, like, it's a simpler game. Like, it looks great. It looks like a console game in terms of fidelity, but the scope seems simpler. And that's kind of what I worry the most about with a mobile VR device. Is it going to mimic, mobile tablets and such, and that the games are geared and steered towards being a simple experience that people can quickly get in and out of, and not the deeper experiences?
Yeah, I'm completely with you, and that's a good point. It's something that I've thought about as well in terms of the Oculus Go. I feel a little bit let down with the Oculus Go in terms of having more substantial experiences in there. Nothing to do, as you mentioned, Steve, nothing to do with graphical fidelity. It's more just bigger scope, more that you can do with any of these games. And hopefully the Oculus Quest won't suffer from that as much, because it's being placed more as a gaming device rather than a media consumption device as the Go was. But yeah, that is a concern. And part of the reason I don't use my Go more is simply because we don't have these big substantial experiences. Again, regardless of graphical fidelity, that doesn't matter to me as long as they've got layers of depth within them, which we are, we're just suffering from a lack of this kind of content on the Oculus Go. Anthony, what did you think of the Oculus Quest and its impact in 2019?
I mean, this is the big product of the year. It's even bigger than just the big product of this year. This is VR's biggest, most important product ever, in my opinion, because the thing about it, you can't really recommend the Oculus Go to everybody full stop, because you don't have the 6 degree of freedom controller. You got this controller that's kind of waving around out there. It's not really tracking your hand. The headset isn't 6 degrees of freedom. Everything else about it is great, but and so that's what the Quest is doing. It's adding the two super key things that we need to add to that. Now, it's moving up from a Snapdragon 825 to an 835. Is that going to be enough? Personally, like, when I think about it, it doesn't sound like it's going to be enough, but you got to imagine Facebook, this is their product. So they got to know what they're doing here. They had to have done a bunch of testing, a bunch of prototyping. They got to feel like this Snapdragon 835 can kind of do what they need to do. Also, they might have a belief system here where the Oculus Quest is a moving platform. It's a moving target. And maybe every single year you get a new Snapdragon in there, And so all of the back catalog of games will continue to work, and new games will be programmed. Like, for example, okay, let's just hypothetically imagine next year in 2020, there's a new Quest with a Snapdragon 845. Now, you might think, oh, that's going to screw everything up, right? Well, here's the thing. A developer could know that you've got to program this for an 835 and an 845, kind of like PlayStation VR developers have to get it working on a original PlayStation 4 and a Pro. And so they might go into that kind of category where it's like, okay, so you got to make it work on an 835, 845. Then when they move even farther along, then it's an 845, 855. You know what I mean? And kind of like do that and have a moving platform. That's a possibility. But I'm super excited for it because this is a product that is gonna really, it's a threat to Nintendo, it's a threat to Sony, it's a threat to Microsoft. And some people might say, well, oh, Microsoft doesn't care about VR, Nintendo doesn't care about VR. It's still a concern for them. They got to imagine that at some point VR is going to be a deal that they have to worry about. Sony's involved with VR right now. This is a shot to the bow of Sony. You're talking about a product that's going to be $399. It's going to come in one single box. You can go to Walmart, Costco, Target, freaking Amazon, Newegg. Everybody's going to have this box. You could go buy it. Everything's in there. You don't need a PC. You don't need a PlayStation. You don't need a processing box. You don't have wires going everywhere. What was Linus talking about? And some of the complaints that he had was the friction of it. And this is going to dramatically reduce friction. Now, one of his complaints was you need space. Well, this is something you can take anywhere. So you can find space and then bring your Quest to where you have space. So I'm super excited about it. I mean, the number one concern that I have that's in the back of my mind is basically what Steve is talking about, and kind of what all of our fears is it going to be good enough that we're not always going to have this thought that we're kind of slumming it a little bit? Like when you had a PlayStation Vita, when you first got your PlayStation Vita, you're playing Wipeout on your PlayStation Vita, and you also have a PlayStation 3, you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is really, really close to the PlayStation 3. And you're playing it and you're enjoying yourself. But at the same time, you're also noticing, oh, yeah, that's really low resolution over there. This is kind of janky over here. You're noticing all the minor trade-offs that come along with it. And I kind of think it's going to be like that. But remember, we are the hypercritical people out there. I was at Christmas. I've talked about this a couple of times in some of my other shows. I went to 2 different Christmas parties. Each party had a Nintendo Switch there, and there were 4 people playing Nintendo Switch. They each had a little tiny controller. They had it hooked up to a big TV, and they're playing 4-player Mario Kart. And it's 4 not millennials, younger, right? And they're all playing, they're all playing Mario Kart. And they're perfectly happy. And the resolution, I mean, it looks pretty good, but it's not like state of the art, right? But I think the average Joe Schmo out there, they're not as hypercritical on visuals as we are. I think you give them hand presence, the freedom to just move around in any direction, no cords yanking on you. It's going to be awesome. I really believe it.
Yeah, I think the what you described there with going to the Christmas party and people playing Mario Kart with the Switch, like that is a good example of what the Switch does well. But like, if you're a hardcore gamer, and I almost vomit even saying it that way, but like, if you're a gamer, like you're not playing Mario Kart like all day, every day. Like, yeah, it works in those very social situations, but whomever at that party owned the Switch, are they going home and playing a bunch more Mario Kart? Like, what are they playing? And that is sort of the idea. Like, Beat Saber is great. Like, I play it for 10, 15, 20 minutes here and there, but like, I'm not playing Beat Saber for 6 hours a day or whatever. Like, there's the consumer out there that will get really into it. Like, all the people that are raving over Contractors right now, like, they're really into that, or War Dust or Onward. Like, is the Quest going to have that sort of scope? And again, I know I'm repeating myself, so I'm not going to take it down that road. But I wanted to use your Switch example as a further continued point that as good as that is, and that's really good in those holiday moments at holiday gatherings and such, it's not necessarily a good indicator of what makes something good the other 364 days of the year when you're not necessarily in that social setting. Just kind of how I feel.
Just on that point, the Switch is a good example because although it's sort of a mobile device, it does have these experiences like Zelda, for example. So you've got Zelda on the Switch, and it's an expansive game. It's an expansive open world game that has all the depth that we all want from games, and yet it's operating on this mobile device. So it's not necessarily the best looking game or anything like that, and that's really what it comes down to. I think the Oculus Quest has the potential to match that kind of experience, and yet it needs the developers to make those things. That's the problem. It's not the power necessarily, I think. with some of this. I mean, it obviously comes into play in some ways, but I think it's more getting the developers that will put the amount of time in that is required to make the games of that level of scope. So I think dismissing it because it's mobile is probably a mistake, but at the same time, you can't argue with the fact that we probably will get a majority of the games will be things like Beat Saber or, I mean, Robo Recall, a dumbed down, graphically reduced version of Robo Recall is coming to the Oculus Quest, which is great, but it's still a very arcadey, very narrow in scope game. So I don't think it's necessarily holding it back. I think it's more down to the developers and getting the developers on board with this stuff, as it always is. It always comes down to content, doesn't it? As we've mentioned numerous times. Okay, well, let's get on to, we have quickly mentioned Valve's HMD. We've had the leaks last year, these photos, these images of this device, which is being manufactured by Valve. And I think it's safe to say that these are not sort of false rumors or anything like that. I think they are making some kind of HMD, and it seems by these images that it's pretty far along. Now, the question I've got for both of you, Anthony, I'll go to you first on this. Valve's HMD, will it be formally announced this year? They're notorious for taking their time on numerous things, Knuckles controllers being one, Half-Life 3, obviously. But what do you think? Will we get a formal announcement this year from Valve?
I don't know that it's going to come from Valve. Like, I still don't believe, like, I don't believe we're going to like order a box and it's going to say Valve and it's going to come from Valve. I still think they're going to work with some other partner here. I know there's like, if you go on the Vive subreddit and talk to everybody, some people are really adamant. No, Valve has a manufacturing facility now. You're really going to buy this from Valve. I find that hard to believe. Will there be a Valve headset this year? There's got to be. There's also got to be one of those games. I know Valve time, I know all the jokes, and I understand all of that, but they have these Knuckles controllers. And I go back to that guy, like I wish I had the video or the name of the exact Valve employee. He was on stage and saying, a year from now, you guys are going to be really blown away. And he was talking about one of those games. And I know they missed it. Like, I know it's been more than a year. We still don't have it. And maybe they're 7 months late. Maybe we get it this spring, but it's going to happen. The 2019 is going to be a very long year, as all years are, and there's going to be something. Something's going to happen. It's got to.
Yeah, Steve, what do you think of the whole Valve situation? You've sort of you've got the Odyssey now as well, so that's sort of upped your game a little bit. But are you in the market to get like a Valve HMD? If it's, I guess it comes down to the specs of the HMD, doesn't it? Really.
I guess I'm always in the market. Like at this point, I'm buying all sorts of things, and I'm fortunate that I'm able to do so. I will say, like, what I think going into something, and you just mentioned the Odyssey, and I'll just say, like, when I bought the Odyssey, my thought was I wanted something because I was wireless with the TP Cast on the Rift. And my idea was like, oh, when I'm playing a seated game, I can get something with a little more fidelity, right? So I think I lost my track of thought a little bit, but I guess what I'm saying is what we think we want changes constantly in this space. And I found with the Odyssey, initially with the Odyssey Plus, but I found with the Odyssey that I just started using it. And like I've been in the last 6 weeks or so, I've barely touched my Rift. My Rift has gotten the most use from my kids, and I have wireless on it. So I'm going back to a wired setup with inferior tracking because I am enjoying the improved fidelity. And it made me start thinking about the Vive. When I transitioned from the Vive to the Rift, it was the fidelity. I liked the increased pixels per degree. Like I couldn't stand that. I think the Vive is the worst VR headset display on the market. So it seems to me I am chasing fidelity. So I guess where I'm going with the Valve HMD is I will have to see where that fidelity is. I'm clearly, like, despite what I would have guessed, willing to make some compromises in order to chase that fidelity. So, in terms of whether this Valve HMD will be formally announced, my gut says it would make sense in that it should be announced, but at the same time, like, like I mentioned earlier, like I would thought Knuckles would be here by now. Like I don't know how Valve operates. I can't get my frame of mind into their frame of mind in terms of how they they didn't show this product. So like, first of all, they've not shown it, unlike with Knuckles, where they've clearly, got it out there in their early versions and in developer kits and such. So I'm going to lean no, that it won't be announced in 2019. I know it's not the popular answer, and I know I stand a good chance of being wrong, but I think I can't get around what they've demonstrated in terms of hardware. Now, are they working on sort of reference design that then is put out there by HTC or LG or something? I think those odds are higher than this headset coming to fruition in 2019 with a Valve badge on it.
Yeah, good point. Well, we've already touched on Knuckles controllers a little bit, so I don't really want to dwell on that. Does anybody want to mention anything else about Knuckles controllers? Presumably, I mean, I have the opinion that they must be making an appearance this year at some point. Anthony, what do you think?
Well, my question for you, Steve's kind of already answered this question, I think, but my question for you is, do you think the Knuckles, like straight up yes or no, will the Knuckles controllers come out without a Valve game on day and date?
Yes? I think so. I think they will, yeah.
Okay.
I think they
Steve
have to.
Kind of agrees with that, right?
Yeah, I think we're going to see Knuckles before a Valve game. Like, I don't see, when we mentioned earlier, I don't see a Valve game dropping in 2019. Yes, I know they're working on the 3 games, but at this point, I'm very pessimistic about any kind of timeline related to Valve. They've demonstrated that they just do shit on their own track. Like it's ready when it's ready. And that's kind of cool. Like I'm not knocking them for it. Like it's a great spot to be in, that Steam is doing so well financially and all that like you don't need to rush a product to market. They're not like HTC, where like the actual life of the company is hanging on getting stuff out there and making money right now. They're in a spot where that's not where they need to be. So they're going to take their time with it and make it right. So I think it's a good thing. But because of that, like I'm not expecting anything from them ever, really. Like we could be having the same conversation in 2022.
What do you think, Anthony? Go on. What say?
No. I kind of, I mean, I believe that the Knuckles controllers were built around these games, right? They were talking about Mario and they were talking about Nintendo, and they were saying when they made Mario 64, they made the Nintendo 64 controller side by side. They made the Nintendo 64 hardware side by side. I don't think Valve is going to release their baby boy and not have a game right there with it. Now, I'm not saying they're going to have 3 of them, but I think that's why like HTC and LG, I think everybody has handcuffs on, because they're waiting for Valve. Like Valve is probably giving them these projections on when they think it's going to happen. And they're like, okay, we're patiently waiting. And then Valve's like, sorry, we're not ready yet. You're just going to have to wait a little bit longer. And that's why we got this awkward lack of hardware.
So Fluke, I missed this. It must have been when I was monologuing, but he said if Valve announced a new HMD design and said they were partnering with HTC again, would you buy it? And I think that's a fantastic question. I'll go to you first, Gary. You were laughing.
No, I think it's not that I think honestly they'll just price it out of the market. That's the problem. I've got no problem with HTC, and I love my Vive. Again, as I mentioned, ridiculous amounts of time on this show. No matter how many times I say it, people will still say that this is VR Roundtable. But their form of the past releases that they have is that they're pricing themselves out of the market. I will not pay that much for a VR headset unless the spec warrants that price, and I don't think it does, unfortunately. But if they do partner with HTC, I won't dismiss it immediately, but I just get the impression that they're going to price it out of the market.
Okay, Anthony, would you buy it?
Yeah, I'd buy it. I mean, I'd buy it knowing it's just like buying Pimax. Like if you bought Pimax right now, you're freaking rolling the dice. Like people are getting these Pimaxes, some of them are breaking. Are you ever going to get them like repaired and stuff? I mean, it's not the safe, comfortable feeling that washes over you when you buy a Sony headset or even like an Oculus headset, it's backed by a company that has a reputation. They have to stand behind their products. HTC apparently doesn't have to stand behind their products. They can get away. They're getting away with it right now. That I mean, everybody on the Vive subreddit is always complaining about customer service and stuff, but hey, they're still getting away with it. You go to any VR arcade, it's filled with Vives. And so, yeah, I'll buy one, but I'll buy one knowing that I better have a bunch of money in the background in case it fails and I need to buy another one. But it's got to be compelling. It's got to be really compelling.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I wouldn't buy it, but I probably would. Like, I'm going to have a backup. Like, I am not a fan of the way HTC has handled the Vive, both from a pricing strategy that you were referring to, Gary, but then also as a support strategy. Like, I agree with you, Anthony, that it's like getting into Pimax. Like, I do question with my Pimax, like, what's it going to be like if I need support, and things like that. So, that's sort of like, I look at it as the early adopter tax. Like, I'm a niche within the niche. Like, even VR is niche on its own. Like, I'm not convinced that I'd have great support with my Odyssey if it failed. The only example of good support that I've personally had was with the Rift when the ribbon cable on the earpiece went out and they sent me a new Rift. Like, so Oculus did come to the plate, but I don't expect that. And I don't know that they didn't come to the plate to a degree because, I host a podcast and people would hear my story. Like, if I was a regular Joe, not that I'm somebody special, but if I was, not public facing at all in any way, like, would they have replaced my headset out of warranty? So support is an issue with all of these headsets and to varying degrees. And with HTC, I would say that they're sort of lower tier in terms of that support. But we're all rolling the dice anyway. So yeah, I would probably be a sucker, be too curious. So long as it was doing something special, doing something different than the other headsets, I probably would be unable to resist the temptation.
Okay, well, let's quickly get on to some talk about console VR. We've briefly mentioned the PSVR because that's more or less a known quantity. And, I think there's some people speculating that the PS5 could possibly be announced in 2019. But also I wanted to get onto Xbox as well. But let's get on to Sony first because they are a known VR quantity. Anthony, the PS5, do you think it will be announced this year? And if so, do you think it will come with any kind of announcement of PSVR 2?
Man, I was hoping. I really was hoping that it would be a November 2019 deal. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we might find out about PS5, and maybe there might even be hope for like spring 2020 for PS5, but the thing is, since the dawn of time, console manufacturers have always said, oh yeah, spring. And spring, like if we go back through the history of every video game console, and I'm talking about here in the United States, it could be different worldwide. The only major video game console I can think of that really came out in the spring was what the Nintendo Switch came out in the spring, right?
Yeah, that's
but
right.
I can't think of a mainstream home console that ever came out in the spring. But anyway, I could imagine like Sony like saying, oh yeah, spring, and then it ends up delayed and it's November 2020. And then as far as PSVR 2, I don't believe, like at one point I was saying, yeah, day and date, PS5 and PSVR 2 day and date. That doesn't make any sense. It's too much money. You're asking your sane people to throw out $1,000. It's just too much money. So right now I say November 2020 for PlayStation 5 and probably whatever the next Xbox is, and then another year for the VR headset. So it is a long wait in Sony land. We're dealing with these Move controllers for a long time.
I think I'm with you in terms of the PS5 announcement. I don't know about PSVR 2. Well, nobody does really, but I think the PS5 announcement, it still feels too early for them. They've got this huge install base. They're still bringing out all of these huge games, these flat games, and there seems no reason for them to make an announcement in 2019. As much as I'd love that to happen, I don't think it will, and I don't think we'll see a PSVR 2 at the same time. I did originally think that we would. I thought that it'd be a simultaneous launch, but I'm sort of moving away from that now. I think it probably will be a year after, but it will be obviously backwards compatible with the original PSVR. Steve, what do you think about the Sony's approach and the PS5?
Well, I think it's possible that we do see PS5 this year. If we look at the PS4, it was announced, I believe, in March. I forget the year, 2013, maybe somewhere around there. Like they did that event that they live streamed it, and you could see the announce of the PS4, and Mark Cerny came out and did his thing. And then it launched later that late October, I think, late October. I would say something like that. Like, I don't have the dates in front of me, but that's the gist of it. And I think they could do the same thing. It's not out of the question. I don't necessarily believe that they will, but it's not out of the question that here, Marchish, April, they announced PS5 and it releases later this year. I don't think we'll get PSVR 2. And in fact, if I'm going to make an argument that I made a couple months ago, in that those that are making VR hardware, I think they can make wide FOV. I think they can make high res. I think the technology's there for them to make an amazing headset. Like Oculus could, if they wanted to, release a headset that would embarrass the Pimax. And we're seeing that, like the Star VR and the Xtal. There's these real high-end units out there, but there's a commercialization issue in that it just costs too much for them to make back that development. I think from Sony's perspective, they know that they make their money off of software, and their issue right now isn't the fidelity of the existing PlayStation VR. Like, those sitting outside of PlayStation VR aren't sitting out and saying, I'm not buying a PlayStation VR because of the FOV. Or I'm not buying the PlayStation VR because of the crappy tracking. Like, they're sitting outside because the games aren't there that are pushing them over the edge. And I think Sony realizes that, and they want to get people over the software edge. So I don't think Sony's going to do a PlayStation VR 2 until they feel they need to from a technology standpoint. So it could be a ways after PS5. Like, and people in chatters are saying Steve Jobs. I'm fine with that. Like, I want his billions too that I guess he had. I don't want to knock on the guy. He's no longer with us, but, there's worse things to be compared to. So I'll take the Steve Jobs comparison. So I think in either way, like, I don't think Sony is in a position where they need to rush the PlayStation VR 2 to market. So I think they need to get the PS5 out there. They got to play that console game with Xbox and all that. Like, they can do whatever they want with PlayStation VR 2, and they can time it till their benefit. And I think they will. At the very least, up until the point where they where they feel pressure from a technology standpoint, and outside of not having analog sticks on the Move controllers, there's no real pressure on them technologically.
Yeah, I really hope that's not the case. I would love a PSVR 2. And I'm coming at this from a VR enthusiast, obviously.
Hey, wait, I just wanted to say one last. You do look like Steve Jobs right now, man. That is funny. You should have been in the freaking movie for it. You could have been like an extra or something. But one thing I will say about PlayStation 5, though, like, there is one scenario where I see a PlayStation 5 this November, and that's if the PlayStation 5 is like $599 US. You know what I mean? Where Sony could have this idea where the PlayStation 5 is going to be really, really high end, and they know that, and they could come out with it saying, well, we're bringing this out now because, like, the hardcore early adopters, they can get it now, and it's going to come down in price over time. And the PS4 is still a great product. We're still supporting PS4. PS4 is still our primary product, but we knew this was going to be kind of expensive. We're going to bring it out now, and it's going to slowly come down over time. And it's not the immediate replacement to PS4. It's more of almost like an Xbox One X kind of a thing, So if they're coming in high, maybe they could come in this year.
Possibly. I mean, the thing you mentioned then as well, because I think the consoles moving forward, because they're all using sort of x86 architecture, so they're basically PCs. They're just cut down PCs now, consoles. So there's no reason to not have backwards compatibility or on pretty much anything that they do now. And we are entering this new phase of consoles, I believe, with the announcement of like a PS4 Pro, the Xbox One X, where it's just a rolling cycle now. All the games will still work on previous versions, they just won't work as well. And I think that's the way it's going. And I think hopefully VR will sort of ride along with that in some capacity. I think it'll be a major mistake if PS5 doesn't support the original PSVR. And I think we all think it will.
Wait. So here's a good question, because I was talking about this on one of my shows. Will the PS5 be backwards compatible with all your PS4 games? Like, we've bought all these PSVR games. I thought, like, in my opinion, it's an absolute no-brainer. Of course, absolutely, 100% compatibility. But like, there were a lot of people in my chat, like Fluke. A lot of people are like, "No way! Like, you're gonna."
It's
like,
got to
no.
be. It's got to be. It's got to be backwards compatible.
I don't think so, because they don't have to. That is a revenue. First of all, I think backwards compatibility is this overblown thing that people, I got to have backwards compatibility. I got to have backwards compatibility. But then when they get it, they don't like. I think Sony lost a lot of money in making sure that PS3 initially was backwards compatible with PS2 and so forth. And I don't think that is anywhere near as important. When people buy a new console, they're not looking in the rearview mirror. They're looking forward. They want the later tech. They want the higher resolution, blah, 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 the effects. And I don't think backwards compatibility is a huge issue on console. And it's the reason why, I mean, we're talking about a place where they'll pay $10 more over PC for a certain game, like Beat Saber, for example. So, I don't think it'll necessarily have it, even though technologically with the x86 architecture that they could do it. But then also there's the licensing issue. And in some cases, like, they make the deal in some studios that does the audio or something, like they say, this is licensed on this hardware, and they have to go back and re-up the license for a different piece of hardware or something. There's that crap that comes in from time to time. I think the bigger question in the same tone, though, is Oculus Quest. Like, that is going to be far, far, far more annoying, in my opinion, if I have to rebuy Beat Saber on my Quest, even though I have it on the Rift. To me, that's the by far the more important question, because that's in the PC-ish space.
That's another question.
It's another question, but I think it's a bigger one.
It's a good question. It's a good question. But wait, one thing I want to say about PlayStation VR, though, is if we think about Microsoft, right, and we think about Nintendo, and we think about the advantage that Sony has right now. What is the advantage that Sony has? They've got a giant catalog of great PlayStation VR games, Farpoint, and all these games that they got that would still be good on PlayStation 5 and PSVR 2. Are they really going to throw away that one single? That's the advantage they have. They got a giant library. Well, Microsoft is starting from scratch. Nintendo starting from scratch.
That's the thing, though. That's the thing. So say the PS5 comes out and it's not got any backwards compatibility. Yet the PSVR, well, if it didn't have any backwards compatibility, then they wouldn't have the PSVR and the PS5. But surely it would be compatible with the current generation of PSVR, and that would require it to be backwards compatible with all the software as well. It seems to me this is a no-brainer. I would assume, beyond any doubt, we're in a different age. This has to be backwards compatible. PS5 has to be backwards compatible with PS4. And I'd be astonished. I would be astonished if it's not. But at the same time, I'm prepared to be astonished.
Okay, now the Quest argument, that's interesting, Steve, because here's my theory on that. My theory is going forward. You're right. Going forward, you're right. They need to figure out some kind of a cross-buy thing, but there's no way they're going to grandfather in everything you already own on Oculus. Like, you've got Kin in your Oculus account, you've got Kin on your Go, and so you get a Quest and you're like, I should have Kin on my Quest, right? Well, I don't think they're going to grandfather that in, but I think they will have a plan going forward, like some kind of cross-buy thing.
Well, they need to, like, because that's kind of to me, that's a bummer. Like I don't know why that just rubbing me extra wrong. Like, it seems odd to have to buy on their store. Like I get, like if I had Beat Saber and Steam, well, I wouldn't get it on my Quest, but I've already given Oculus the money for, not me, because I got it for free, but you know, the speaking in the reference of a general consumer, you've already given them $20 for Beat Saber. To give it to them again just seems wrong. Like, I don't know.
Okay.
They got to make money some way.
Let's get on to Xbox. So Microsoft, we've spent a little bit longer on Sony than I expected, but Xbox. So with VR, the VR community, Xbox are notoriously quiet with VR. They mentioned it once with the announcement of the Scorpio or Xbox One X, and have just remained silent since then on VR. So what do you think? Will this coming year give any insight into Microsoft's plans with VR? Will they announce anything with VR? We know that they're going to be making an appearance at E3, whereas Sony are not. So that gives them a bit of room. I think they can sort of, they have to have something to announce in terms of flat gaming, because they've been so quiet these past few years, and they need something anyway in terms of flat gaming, which will obviously be their priority. But I think it's also an opportunity for them to make some kind of VR announcement. I'm not saying we'll get anything released this year, but possibly, you know, in 2020. Steve, I'll go over to you first on this one. What do you think are Microsoft's plans with Xbox VR?
Nothing. Like, I'm saying no to everything, aren't I? Like, I'm Mr. No today. Apologies. But I am Steve Jobs after all, so I should bag on Microsoft. I don't like they've shown their hand. They've been public. They've already said, "Hey, we're not in it right now. We're waiting and seeing." I don't think 2019 is going to change their answer. I don't think there's going to be enough that happens in 2019 that makes them go, okay, we were standing on the sideline. Now we've seen enough. Let's jump in. I don't think that's happening in 2019. So I expect them to hold serve.
Okay. Anthony, what about you?
Yeah, well, Microsoft, they're in a funny position right now because, like, I mean, just as a flat gamer, they just came out with this Xbox One X not very long ago. And so if they came to E3 and said, hey, here's our new console, Xbox Titanium, you know, $599 or whatever the heck, you know, isn't there going to be a lot of people kind of pissed off saying, hey, I just bought an Xbox One X like a minute ago. You said it was the most powerful video game console ever.
Xbox Titanium is probably a better name than anything they're actually going to give it, though.
Yeah. But so they're kind of in a bad situation here. So, but what I will think they'll do is kind of what Gary talked about. Like maybe they'll speak towards their next gen as a 2020 kind of a thing. They might even call it Project whatever, you know, and they'll kind of like talk about it, but it'll be a 2020 thing. Microsoft, they've dodged a lot of bullets here because, see, the thing is they've missed out on this last generation for VR. So that's over. That's done. So now they're waiting for this new generation. And then when they bring out their new console for this new generation, it's going to be the same deal with Sony. You're not going to ask your fans to spend $500 twice. So they're going to wait a year. So they're going to introduce their console, and then the VR is going to come a year later. So we're talking like November 2021 before we actually get Xbox VR in the way that we've always wanted Xbox VR. I believe we're going to get Windows Mixed Reality 2.0 on the PC before we even sniff an Xbox VR headset.
It is a strange one. I agree with what you were saying there, Anthony, about the Xbox One X, which it leaves them in a difficult position. We know that Sony is sort of ramping up towards the PS5 now. I think that's sort of been rumored about, and people are just speculating about that for this coming year. Whether it's announced this year or next year, we don't know. But they are sort of ramping up towards that. And yet the Xbox One X, because it was such a bigger upgrade over the original Xbox One rather than the PS4 Pro, I think it leaves them in a difficult position because it was a lot of money, and it's also a relatively powerful console as well. So they don't want to just constantly announce these more powerful consoles all the time. It just sets a precedent where people are constantly waiting and expecting a new console to be announced, similar to VR headsets, as we've mentioned before in the past. But Xbox VR, I don't know. I don't think we'll hear anything this year either, honestly. I would hope to get something out of E3, but yeah, hearing you speak about it, I don't think that will happen. So yeah, we'll just see where it goes. But I do want to get onto some software talk as well. So that's pretty much hardware that we've been speaking about so far. But let's get on to 2019. There are a few titles that we know about that are going to be released this year. Are there any particular games that we want to talk about? The first one, I'll go first, actually. The first one, which is a release which will be coming relatively soon, in a couple of weeks, I believe. It's Ace Combat 7 for PSVR. I'm relatively excited for this one. I'm looking forward to it. It's been in development for a long time. The VR content within Ace Combat 7 is yet to be seen. I think there's a few hours of VR content from what we've heard, but we'll see when it's actually released. Other than that, Ace Combat 7, Anthony, are you excited for that game, or is there anything else that you've got in like the next couple of months that you're excited for?
I mean, I'm excited for like Population 1, Space Junkies, and I mean, whatever happened to Space Junkies? Remember that game? So I think they're gonna, like reintroduce that and kind of launch that. This Elder Scrolls Blades, whatever it is, when it finally hits the scenes. We still have never heard of a date for Defector. Man, that really got delayed. And it's kind of sounded like now, Phil Yarn in chat says Stormlands, but I think that's like a third quarter kind of a game. Same thing with like Lone Echo 2, might be even fourth quarter for some of those. Now that we're this far in, I mean, it could be like maybe we find out at GDC an official date for Defector launching May 23rd or something like that. So that got delayed quite a bit. Am I excited for, what do you call it, Ace Combat 7? Not really. I've never been an Ace Combat guy, but actually in VR, I'm more interested in it in VR than ever as a flat gamer. And so this is something I'm going to try to grab it at Redbox and just rent it and just play a little bit of the VR content just to see like the cockpit and everything. I don't know if you guys have the trailer running right now, but in the trailer for Ace Combat 7, it looks pretty good. Like the cockpit catches on fire at one point and just you're seeing like everything outside. Like it looks really cool. So I think that would be fun.
That's the thing, yeah. Ace Combat 7, I've never played an Ace Combat game either, honestly, but I'm into flight simulators and that kind of stuff. And I know that Ace Combat is a little bit more arcadey than a traditional flight simulator, but I'm excited just to go in there and try it out because I want something that's not necessarily a simulator, but still gives you that feeling of flying around. And in VR, it just brings it out. I can't wait for this game, honestly. Steve, what do you think?
I'm mildly curious about Ace Combat. I think from a design, from what I've seen of the game, it looks like it could really fit with VR well, and that VR would bring a lot to the table for that game. I've never played a down to earth, unintended flying game. Oh no, Ultra Wing, sorry. But other than Ultra, most of the flying based games I've played have been like set in space. So Ace Combat is set a little differently, and I think I think it'll bring something unique to VR. The problem I have with it is that I'm concerned that it's going to feel tacked on with just a few, is it going to get the Gran Turismo sport treatment? We know that it's like the whole game isn't fully featured in VR. So that, it kind of takes my hype down a little bit on that game. But, and then like Anthony, I don't know, buy it, Redbox it or something, getting my hands on it, is another thing. Cause with Sony stuff, it's hard for us to get review keys and such. So, on the rest of 2019, I know Anthony named some things. I would say the biggest thing I'm looking forward to, one is Subnautica Below Zero. Although I don't know if they've said that they are giving that VR support. It's going to come out in early access, and they're saying it'll come out of early access towards the end of the year. But I don't think, and maybe Rudel Zavidno, he's in chat, has already mentioned it, but maybe he can confirm that it has VR support. So that's a big question mark for me. But then the other thing I'm looking forward to in 2019 is probably something that isn't announced yet. I don't know that we're getting a Respawn game. It's not even titled yet, so I don't know if necessarily that's happening in 2019. I agree with Anthony in that Stormlands, it'll be late this year. What's type of like Hellblade or Borderlands type announcements is going to happen in 2019? That might be what I'm looking forward to the most, because what we don't know. And then
hey, Borderlands on PC.
Yeah, Borderlands on PC.
Just on that point, Steve, though, we may as well get on to a point, because people are talking about it in chat about sort of our hopes for VR as well. And I know we wanted to get onto that in terms of software releases. So why don't you tell us, because people are talking about No Man's Sky. This is one that keeps constantly getting teased for me, and I would love No Man's Sky. I need this game in VR in one way or another. But what are your other hopes for, like, possible software titles during 2019?
I'm not very creative. So like the one game that I want, like, I would have to say, like, in terms of a port or something like that, is no question BioShock. And a few weeks ago, I think since we did our last show, we were trolled. I forget the name of the company, but they put out on Twitter. I think it's a company, a developer that had done some porting for 2K. They're drawing a blank. Anthony, if you know who they are, say it.
But I can't remember. But Steve, I was wondering, like, when you saw that, because pretty quickly we found out that was not the case, but there were a handful of hours where nobody knew. Did you really think BioShock VR was imminent for a minute there before you got?
Yes, I thought for sure. I was like, oh snap! Like, because the way they did it, like, it was the way the tweet was handled, the hashtags that they used on the tweet. Like, it wasn't just me. Like, the whole dang VR community said, all right, we're getting BioShock. Like, everybody was geared up for it, myself included. And the only thing I was like, oh, is it going to be a PlayStation exclusive instead of coming to PC and all that? Like, sort of like Borderlands. But, so that is probably my one, like, old game dream port. But then my other wish list is No Man's Sky, which, Gary, you put it on the list. That game just seems appealing. And then, I would like to just see more, like, from a business standpoint. I still believe all of these 2 years in, a point that I've made is that I think VR needs to port from the mainstream, all a Resident Evil 7 type thing, like a fresh new game coming to Pancake and coming to VR simultaneously. I know people say that ports don't translate to the motion controls the same way. Fallout, Skyrim, you got hand presence, but it's click button to do action, that sort of thing. But I think that's better for the industry, and those bigger scope games, although maybe less VR centric than a built for VR game, I think that's good for the business, and it's good for that whole chicken and egg problem that we're in now, where VR hardware isn't taking off because software is a little down, and software isn't taking off because there's not enough hardware out there. So the biggest thing I want in 2019 is to knock down that wall of the software issue, and I think a good way of doing that is getting your Pancake mainstream games, getting them a VR port.
Let me pass it over to Anthony then. So with that in mind, with these Pancake games, these flat games, and because that's really all we have, we don't know any unknown quantities in terms of games that are going to be announced that are built for VR. But what would be your ideal kind of games that could potentially be released in 2019 for VR? Okay.
Real quick before I do that, I just wanted to mention there are a few games that are coming that it didn't pop to mind immediately, but I got a little list here. Firmament by Cyan, the developers of Abduction. They have Firmament coming. There's a game called Blunt Force by Moned Rock. It's kind of like a World War II thing. Looks really, really good. Zed is this game that kind of came out of nowhere that looks really good. It's coming in the spring. Shadow Legend VR is by the Mervils guys. District Steel looks pretty good. Nostos, that RPG. There's a game called The Rig that looks pretty good. Titan Arena. So there's some stuff coming. I just wanted to mention a couple of those things. But in terms of your actual question here, Portal VR, it's coming this year. That is what
with Knuckles.
that's the Knuckles game. I don't know what it's going to exactly be called. It's not going to be called Portal VR, but there will be a Portal VR game this year. I believe it, because all the little, think about it. You go back to the lab, go back to robot repair in the lab. That could have been a tiny little sequence of Portal VR. That moon dust thing or whatever that they were showing off for the Knuckles controllers, a tiny little segment of Portal VR. So Portal VR would be a game. What is my dream? Like, what would I dream of? I'd love BioShock. Oh my God, I would love BioShock. I would love Red Dead Redemption. Of course, any kind of Grand Theft Auto. Yeah. I mean, if I could have one game, it would be Grand Theft Auto, because think of what that would do for VR.
I want an open world. Yeah, I want Grand Theft Auto on Red Dead. These open world games are the ones that attract me. Don't get me wrong. BioShock would be fantastic as well. Yeah, I'd definitely
Dead
jump on BioShock.
Dead Space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, let's get back to some more software stuff, because I wanted to touch on quickly E3 this year. We know that Sony are not going to be at E3, so we can't really expect any kind of announcements for PSVR there. But do we see, because Oculus always have some kind of presence at E3, I think they sponsored the PC Gamer portion of E3 last year, and hopefully, they'll do that as well this year. But do you foresee any kind of VR announcements at E3, or do you think it's pretty much going to be a dud? Steve, I'll go over to you first.
The way you phrasing these questions make me seem like a bad guy, because I'm going to say no. Like, no. I think I think, we didn't get a ton out of E3 last year. So I think what we'll get, really, it depends a lot on Sony. Like, Sony is what I think will carry E3, in any kind of a VR announcements. But, I think we might get a sizzle reel. Like, I mean, last year was a sizzle reel. Like, they downgraded from the year before because they caught a lot of flack.
Well,
the year they showed Skyrim.
Sony are not at E3 this year. So yeah.
No, then I don't expect a ton of VR focused stuff at all at E3.
Yeah, that's the problem. I guess with Sony not being there, it is a bit of a problem, isn't it? But Oculus do always have some kind of presence, but they don't really make any announcements or anything like that. Anthony, have you got any hope for E3 this year?
Well, Sony isn't going to be there, but they're still going to do something right around that time. Like they're going to have a major, like they're going to invite the IGN editors and everybody to San Francisco and show them an entire catalog of different games coming, and we'll find out about a lot of PSVR games. So it's the same. They're technically not going to E3 because they're tired of paying all that money for what? They're just going to do their own thing, but they're still going to have a presence at that point in time. But yeah, Microsoft, they're not going to, like, I don't think they're going to mention the word VR one time probably. And so, yeah, E3 is not what we're looking forward to.
No, that's, I don't know. I don't know about that. I never thought about that. I never thought that they would even do anything around that time. But we're getting some comments in chat saying that Sony announced several PSVR games 2 to 3 weeks ahead of E3, which they did. Like Astrobot, they announced that, I think it was a few days before E3 actually took place last year. And that's true. Maybe they will do something like that. I feel, honestly, like they're saving themselves for PlayStation Experience announcements. That's where it's going to come later in the year. It's going to be around in November, and they're going to announce PlayStation 5 possibly at PlayStation Experience. I think they want to move away from E3 or even expectation from around that time and move it towards their own event, which they're going to gradually build up. I don't know whether that's going to happen, but yeah, that's just the way things fell. That's just the way I think things are going for Sony anyway. Quickly as well, I did want to touch on some AR stuff. So Magic Leap was released to developers last year, and I think it's sort of got mixed reactions overall. Some people are very impressed by it, and others are not quite so. But do you think there will be any sort of significant AR announcements in 2019? We know that there was a video. Sorry, I should have noted this down actually. From Leap, the people that do Leap Motion, they're creating their own AR headset, and they revealed a new video this past week where they're showing some sort of further progression on that, how it's running without PC now. So it's like got a box. I say it's running without a PC, but they still are holding a relatively big size box around with them, but using AR as well. AR has always been exciting. I know, Anthony, you've been excited with AR and the promise of Magic Leap. Possibly slightly disappointed with the launch last year, but do you see AR making any big improvements in 2019?
Not really. AR is hard, man. It is. I mean, I think we saw with Magic Leap how hard AR is. It is a hard problem to solve. And some of the technologies that you need for proper AR, it's just not mature yet, because really what you need is you need a lot of like AI and machine learning and all, because see, AR, it has to be able to analyze your room and where you are. It has to know what a table is and what a chair is, and it has to do all of that in real time. That is really hard. And Magic Leap has been a disappointment. I mean, there's no question about it. But it's just AR is very hard. So there's nothing I'm really expecting in the year 2019. I know Apple's working on stuff. They're definitely working on something in AR. Google is working on AR. Like, everybody's working on AR. Facebook is working on AR. Facebook has people. I wouldn't be tremendously shocked if at OC6 or whatever, there's a big AR component of that, and they start talking about a future AR thing at Facebook. But I don't know that I don't think we're going to have a major project imminent. Although, HoloLens 2.0, right? Like, that's coming due pretty soon, HoloLens 2.0. So maybe we'll see, like, the rumors with HoloLens is that it's going to have double the field of view that it had previously, which is really bad. So it's not like like if they double their field of view, it's not that much beyond where Magic Leap is. So it's kind of a marginal improvement there. But the tracking should be a new generation of tracking, and I'm really excited for their new generation of tracking, because that will eventually probably trickle down to Windows mixed reality headsets as well. And you know what I am excited about from an AR standpoint? Let's go back to that secret Valve headset. I think AR built into VR headsets could be a really big thing. Like Vive Pro, they haven't really done much with the Vive Pro as far as that. But remember when we saw some of those demos where, they're standing in a place and you see the floor and everything, and they're doing some AR stuff with a VR headset? I think that might be a big thing in 2019. Like we could get a major headset that is really trying to do some AR stuff as well.
Yeah, just quickly, it was Project North Star that I was thinking about from the Leap Motion guys. Steve, what do you think about AR in 2019?
Again, I'm going to go with a no. Like, why? I'm not, I don't know. Am I pessimistic? Am I a pessimistic person, guys? Like,
realistic. Let's say realistic.
So, I don't expect a lot in AR. I'm a fan of AR. I think it has a very, very, very bright future. I am, positive on AR, but I don't expect a lot of traction, in this particular year. In fact, I think the big issue with AR will be more in the integration space than it will be in the technology space of getting AR to be right in terms of photo tracking and any of that kind of stuff. I think how it's integrated and pushed into our daily lives, our daily routines, I think that'll be the bigger piece of the puzzle. And I give a little more credence to someone like an Apple or a Google who already have us out there carrying around mobile computers in our pockets to figure out that integration solution. Because when I get whatever AR device I'm ultimately going to have, I want to be able to use it and almost not feel like I'm carrying around another device. I know technically I will in some capacity, but I want it to instantly integrate with, my cell phone. If I get a text notification or if I'm using GPS directions, I already have that problem now. If anybody has GPS in their car, or, like a touchscreen in their vehicle, they have that disconnect between their cell phones and their vehicle. And I know Apple has done Apple Car and Google does their version of it. I forget what it's called. but it's that integration, that cohesion that brings it all together. And to me, like, I've seen nothing on that front in terms of AR. And I know it's not Magic Leap's job. Magic Leap is focusing on the hardware and the tech itself. Like, they don't have mobile phones out there. But I think before AR becomes this readily consumable thing that I, as a person, cares about, I'm going to have to be sold on how it's going to plug into my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think we've discussed pretty much everything on the list we had down here. I do want to very quickly just go through it. I've got around 15 minutes we can talk about some of the stuff that we've been playing over the holiday break. Anthony, I'll go over to you first. I know you do your daily show anyway, so you've probably not had as much downtime as we've had, but is there anything in particular you want to talk about that you've been playing over the past 2 weeks?
Well, one thing I can mention is Farpoint for PlayStation VR. Like, I'm super, super late to the party, but that was on sale for $10 and I finally grabbed it. I had my aim controller already. And so I got into Farpoint and man, that game looks good. Like, you want to talk about, like, that is something that I believe Sony got this developer, Impulse Gear. They gave them a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of time, and that was the result of it. And that was impressive. I was in Farpoint, going around looking at the world and everything, and I'm playing it, and I'm like, wow, this looks like Mars. I feel like I am standing on Mars. This was before I got to all the spiders and everything, very early in the experience where there's really no enemies anywhere. And my wife had a friend that was over and they were talking in the other room, and I shouted over, I was like, you guys, you got to check this out. I'm on Mars. I'm standing on Mars. And so I put both of them into it, so they're holding the gun and everything and they're looking around. They're like, wow, you're right. This really does look like Mars. This is pretty awesome. And so I played Farpoint. I mean, I haven't played all the way through it, but I got to all the spiders and everything. I have a fear of spiders, but for me, there's some, like, if a spider is kind of like an alien looking spider, it doesn't trigger my fear as much. Or if it's like a robotic spider, it doesn't trigger my fear as much either. So I was okay. I haven't seen any like super realistic earth looking spiders there. So I was okay with that. I did play that. Scraper. I don't know. Have you guys played much Scraper? First Strike. I like that game. I wish I could get a little bit more time into it. It's weird because it's a seated game. You're in this cockpit, but I really like the sci-fi world of it, like iRobot and everything. I wouldn't say it's AAA. It's like a AA, but there's dialogue, there's production values. It has this kind of soundtrack, orchestral movie-like soundtrack that's going on in the background. So I like Scraper. I'm trying to think of stuff that I've just played recently. I revealed that Windlands 2 is my game of the year, right? And I continue to play that. And I haven't completely finished it, but I love Windlands 2.
I do too. Yeah, absolutely fantastic game. Yeah, no doubt about it. I don't think anyone could argue with that being, well, I don't understand people that don't think that could be a potential game of the year. Yeah, I loved Windlands 2. Steve, let me go over to you then. What games have you been playing over the past couple of weeks?
The biggest game I played has been, or the most time-consuming game that I played has been the Forest VR. It was something that I identified when it came out that I liked what it was trying to do, and when it came out, it's a bit of a performance hog. It's a gorgeous-looking game if you play it flat. It's a very good-looking game. Lots of vegetation density because, hey, the forest, right? Like, it would be lame if it didn't have a good-looking forest. So, the game, like, it wasn't what I was expecting, though. Like, there is a serious horror aspect to it. Like, a good part of that game is spent in the caves. And, man, the caves are pretty intense. Like, it is a horror game. Like, but it's very, even when it's less horror-y, it's still very tense. Like, you think of, Arizona Sunshine where you're fighting zombies. It was almost done in this, I don't want to say cartoony, but like, I never felt a sense of not just fear, but a sense of tension. The forest brings that out. Like, it just completely caught me off guard because I really remained pretty ignorant about the game and its setting and what was truly going on. So I think since it came out in VR, it came out earlier this spring. I want to say it was like, I don't know, April-ish. It was what I have in my mind.
Around there, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the date in front of me, but since then it's got a couple patches and it's pretty good. Now it does, someone in chat asked, does it have motion controls? And yes, it does have complete hand presence. But it's because it's a flat game, they have translation issues, particularly because it's compatible with a Vive, with a Vive wand. So there's a lot of doubling up. Like on a gamepad, you would come up to a log I'm just using this as a simple example. And if you pressed X on an Xbox controller, it would do one thing. If you pressed A, it would do something else. So it's very difficult to emulate that in VR. So they got around it by doubling up the function of a buttons. If you just click a button, it does one thing. If you press and hold, it does another thing. So there's a lot of getting used to the controls, and it's not perfect. Then there's also in one of the primary menus where you craft your items, you make an arrow out of a stick and feathers. It doesn't, when you're pointing at your items, it doesn't tell you what the item is, but when you play it flat, it shows it. So I think they're still doing work on it in VR, but from an atmosphere, I got caught in a situation. I was up on this high built platform thing and I had these mutant zombie things down there and I was running out of arrows and I ran out of my dynamite. I ran out of everything and I'm just trapped. And there are so you can't just freely save. You have to save at a rest point. So it had me in a tense situation. So, if I had spent more time with the game throughout the year, I probably would have represented it somewhat in our Game of the Year discussion. Is very, very good atmosphere. And then I poked around in Skyrim, Borderlands, and Wipeout. I'm not going to really spend any time talking about them. Just Skyrim is a game I keep going back to, like I did with Fallout 4 over the year. I expect over 2019, I'll chip away at Skyrim and maybe wrap it up towards the end of 2019 or something. Borderlands, I did spend some time with it, both with Move controllers and with a gamepad. And surprise, I like it better with a gamepad because the Move controllers suck for locomotion. And then Wipeout's Wipeout. I just wanted to spend more time in it. It's a good game.
Yeah, I spent a bit of time in Wipeout as well. Actually, it's one of those games that I always think about going back to, and I never get a chance normally. But I did set aside a little bit of time to go into Wipeout. Yeah, fantastic. Still a fantastic game. So for me, I spent 6 days, away from my house, but I took my Oculus Go with me and I played a few games in there. So I played Kin, a fantastic game. We've all played Kin. It's just a great game and works so well on the go. Ultra Wings. This is one that surprised me so much when I first got my Oculus Go because it mimics. I played it on PSVR before I got my Oculus Go, and it's so close to that experience, and yet you're in this mobile platform that I can take anywhere, I can play anywhere, and I played just bits here and there. I did a mission here, a mission there, and it's just a fantastic game. It looks great, it feels great to play. And the other thing on the Oculus Go, so I sideloaded Quake. I've also got Minecraft, just very quickly before I get onto Quake. Minecraft on the Oculus Go, I sideloaded that, and that's a great game as well. But with Minecraft and also Quake, there are a few very small performance issues. It's not like it ruins the game or anything like that, but you do long for the day where Minecraft will have a native release on the Oculus Go, because I think that will take it to the next level, both in terms of the hardware. People selling the hardware, Minecraft, a native release will be fantastic, where it just performs perfectly. And it's not that it performs badly if you sideload it, it's just that you do get occasional missed frames, and if you're accustomed to experiencing them, then you can see them very easily. It sort of dampens the experience a little bit. Quake runs pretty good on the Oculus Go in VR, and I spent probably the most amount of time in Quake. It's a game that I played, obviously, like 25 years ago or whatever it was. It was, well, about 20 years ago. on my PC, and playing it in VR is just an incredible experience, especially when it's on a mobile platform. So yeah, I highly recommend people look at that. So yeah, Wipeout. The other thing I quickly want to mention is GZ Doom or GZ Doom VR, which is now it's a release of the original Doom for VR, which now incorporates room scale and motion controllers. A great experience. Just placing yourself within these levels that I've played millions of times before, and just experiencing them as if you're actually within this world is just a kind of surreal experience, but one that I think is valuable. It's not like I'm going to play through the whole game again or anything like that, but it's a really good experience. And I spent probably more time than I should in that game than I have in some other VR games. So they're the ones I really wanted to hit on. Honestly.
Hey, Gary, quick question about Quake on the go. So how do you move through the world and then also control your gun?
Yeah, so it's a gamepad. I use a gamepad.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically you're looking, your gun is fixed within the center of your view, the same as the original game. You're just using your head, but it works really well. And again, performance isn't terrible. It's just you do notice occasional hitches. But even that, I don't even care. It's so good being in that game. Highly recommended. Okay, has anybody got anything they want to add before we close up the show this week?
Nothing I can think of. We didn't spend too much on CES, but because it's next week. But I guess we'll have a lot to break down next week.
Yeah. I just quickly want to encourage people to hit that like button if they get a chance. That would be great. And also, if you're listening to the audio podcast, if you can leave us a review on your podcast service of choice, that would be great too. Other than that, we're back for 2019. I think we're on a pretty much regular schedule from now on. So we'll see you next Sunday at the usual time, and the audio podcast will be uploaded as usual. One thing finally I want to mention is the timestamps for the episode will be added. If they're not there immediately, then they'll be added a little bit later on. That's all. But just want to quickly mention that. But thanks for watching the show, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.